Welcome back to the Swallow's Nest Homestead. Today we're talking all about cast iron. We'll talk about the benefits of cooking with cast iron, as well as how to do your day-to-day cleaning and seasoning. And then we'll also talk about the intermittent deeper seasoning process as well. Okay, so what are some of the reasons that cast iron is so great? Why does everybody love cast iron? Well, it is great at conducting heat and holding the heat. So you get much more even cooking. You don't get hot spots in your pans, things like that. While it's not an inexpensive pan for the most part, they last forever. If you take good care of your cast iron, it is a family heirloom and it will last for generations. Also, for people who are iron deficient, women in particular, cast iron actually adds small amounts of iron into your food and helps restore depleted iron levels. Now, if you are someone who happens to have high iron levels, you may want to not cook in cast iron on a daily basis, or not cook in cast iron at all if it's a health risk for you. That is something to consider, but the amount of iron that gets into your food is not so great that if you have average iron levels, that it's going to cause you to be in iron overload. One of the other great things about cast iron is that when you take care of it properly, it is naturally non-stick, without any of the risks of some of the chemicals associated with non-stick cooking, like Teflon and things like that. So it does take time to get your cast iron up to that level, especially if you bought brand new cast iron. I have a variety of pans. Some of them I bought at thrift stores. Some of them, I think only one of them I bought new. But they do become non-stick with proper care, and they are, once you get the hang of it, they're really easy to use. So next we're going to go over your day-to-day seasoning practices or cleaning practices after you use your cast iron. I have primarily skillets. I do have some ceramic coated saucepans as well, and I have a Dutch oven. So the ceramic coated are managed differently than your standard bare cast iron, because they don't need to be seasoned because of the ceramic coating. But you do want to take care of washing them, that you don't scratch that ceramic coating. And when you're cooking as well, you don't want to use metal utensils because you'll scratch that coating and damage it, and then it can rust. If cast iron is not properly cared for, it will rust, especially if you leave water in it. And so that's one of the things I'll talk about, or you'll hear me talk about later, is how important it is to dry your pans well when you're done, after you've washed them, and before you're putting them away, before you season them, because they will rust. A rusty pan is not a ruined pan. You can fix it, but ideally you don't want to let that happen in the first place. So let's talk about seasoning. You want to season a pan every time you use it, so that way every time you do use it, that coating gets heavier and thicker and becomes more and more non-stick. So it's really important to season your pans after every use. And this is just a light seasoning. It's not a real labor-intensive thing. And then anytime that the non-stick coating, every time it seems to start sticking a bit, or if you don't use it as frequently, and sometimes I just do it like once or twice a year, I will do a deep seasoning in the oven. So we'll go over how to do that as well. Okay, so as you can see here, we have a small cast iron skillet. This one's actually happens to be a Le Creuset. It's one of my favorites. I got it at a garage sale for $1.50. But you can see I made a grilled sandwich in it for lunch, and it's not real clean. It's got some oil, and but this is the easiest way to clean, or the easiest to clean, because really all you have to do is wipe the oil out of it, preferably while it's still warm. It makes it easier. You just take a paper towel and rub all the oil and little bits of food out. And the oil from cooking acts as seasoning for future uses. So like I said, that is the simplest way to clean. You can see this pan here. I made scrambled eggs for breakfast this morning, so there's a little bit of residual egg on there. You can see it doesn't have the excess oil in the bottom because that got soaked up into the eggs while we were cooking. So the first thing I'm going to do with this one, if I can find my tool, there it is. This little scraper is an indispensable tool for cleaning cast iron. It really helps to scrape off cooked on food without damaging your nonstick coating like scrubbing would. So what I do is I take it, because it's got rounded edges, I just scrape the egg off around the edge and scrape it off the bottom. Now, once I've got it all scraped off really well, I'll give it a good rinse and see if there's anything I missed. And if I keep scraping, or sometimes I'll use the sponge to kind of get the last little bits off. Okay, you can see I've scraped it out and there's no egg left on there. I rinsed it out. It's still got a little bit of water on it. I don't like to thoroughly dry with a towel because it tends to stain the towel, but also because this was from this morning, so it's been sitting a while, and the pan is no longer hot. So I'll turn it on to about medium, and what that does is it helps thoroughly dry the pan, but then it also, because it's hot, then when we oil the pan, and you want to oil a pan after every time you use it, like I showed in the first one, we used the oil that was already there. In this case, I've removed what was left of the cooking oil. There wasn't very much because a lot of it was in the eggs. So we'll use that heat to help season the surface of the pan once it's dry. Whatever you do, don't walk away, because it's really easy to forget that you put the burner on, and you could end up burning all your seasoning off and setting off your smoke detector, and then you gotta kind of start over again. So, and I figured out from personal experience. So now that the pan is dry, we are going to season it. Okay, so now our pan is warm and dry, and I'm just going to take a little bit of coconut oil. In this case, sometimes I use bacon fat. I've used ghee. You can use almost any fat that is high heat tolerant. You don't want to use olive oil or anything like that. So you're just going to rub it around the pan. Make sure you get all the sides really good, and just make sure it's got a nice coat on it. And then we're going to wipe it off. We're going to wipe all that fat right back off as best you can. I just used a different part of the same paper towel. You can use a fresh paper towel. So it should be, it looks slightly shiny. but you can't really see visible oil in the pan. So to deep season your cast iron, you want to start with a clean pan, and you want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Once it's preheated, you'll put the cast iron in the oven for about 5 to 10 minutes so that it's nice and hot. Once it's been in the oven for 5 to 10 minutes, you want to pull it out. Keep in mind, the handle will be hot. Now, what you want to do is increase your oven temperature to at least 450 degrees. If your oven will go hotter, go up to 500 degrees. We're going to add a very thin layer of oil, similar to what we did with the day-to-day seasoning. But instead of using a cooking oil, we are going to use flax oil. The reason we use flax oil, even though it is a very volatile oil, it can go rancid very easily, and it should always be kept in the refrigerator. At high heat, flax oil polymerizes, which means it forms a polymer coating on the cast iron, which helps to make it more nonstick, and it's a longer lasting, deeper coating than your day-to-day seasoning, which is why I do it about once or twice a year, because that way you're building on using that as like a base, and you're building on it even more for your seasoning. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour like a dime-sized, that's a little more than a dime-sized, dollop of oil on there. And then I'm going to mix it around and get it all over the outside of the pan. And for this, I'm actually going to do the top lip of the pan, and I'm going to do part of the handle, and just get it everywhere. Now I'm going to take a separate clean paper towel, fresh paper towel, and I'm going to wipe it all off. And this is important because if you have too much oil, your coating will become sticky instead of polymerizing and becoming nonstick. It'll actually be tacky to the touch. So you can see it's not bright and shiny, but there is a little bit of a sheen to it. And so now there we have, that's the flax oil. And now, once the oven is preheated to 500 degrees, I'm going to put it back in the oven. And we are going to set a timer for 1 hour. And then you want to turn on your vent fan because it will smoke a bit. Okay, so now the cast iron pan is in the oven at 500 degrees with the timer set for an hour. When that hour is up, you just turn off the oven and let it cool naturally. So it'll sit in there for at least another hour. So after the pan has cooled completely, you can remove it from the oven and use it as usual. Okay, I wanted to show you, this is one of my ceramic coated saucepans, and you can see the coating does get a little bit discolored with time. It doesn't hurt it at all. Think of it, it's kind of like a seasoning of its own. You don't need to season it between uses. You just want to, if there's food stuck on, you don't want to scrub it too hard because it will scratch the coating. The best thing that I have found, if say I burned something or if something stuck to the bottom, the like pasta, sometimes if I do pasta and I don't have enough, I put too much pasta in the pan and it doesn't move, it'll stick. And in that case, I will let it soak for just a little bit, 10 minutes maybe at the most. And I set a timer because you don't want to let cast iron soak for a long period of time because it can rust. It's less likely to happen with the ceramic coating, but as you can see, like this edge here is not ceramic coated, and that can rust. So if that doesn't work, and after you've soaked it, you can try the scraper. Again, the scraper works really well. The scraper, as long as it's a plastic scraper, is not likely to damage your ceramic coating. But another option that I have found works relatively well is to put water in the pan and put it on the stove and bring the water to a boil, and then add a tablespoon or so of baking soda. And that baking soda helps to lift the stuck on food particles off the bottom of the pan, and then it makes it a lot easier. You can just go back in with that scraper and scrape it off and then wash as usual. Okay, I just want to show you one last tip. You can see I made fried eggs in this morning, and the pan was a little too hot. So there's just a little couple of spots here where a little bit of egg stuck on, but it's not like the scrambled eggs where we need to scrape it off. And for me, the easiest way to clean this is to sprinkle some salt in the pan. Now some of my salt got damp, so it's kind of large, but you want coarse salt is ideal. Kosher salt will work. You just take the salt and use it to scrub. Just use the salt to scrub off those bits of food. One final thought about cleaning cast iron. A lot of people are worried because they've always been told you never use soap on cast iron. I personally don't use soap on my cast iron, but if you think about it, any restaurant that uses cast iron, it's going to use soap. The health department is not going to get away with not using soap. So I would say limit your use of soap if you do feel you need to use soap. I personally don't, and to my knowledge, I've never had a problem. But that's my personal experience, and that's not necessarily based on any research or science. If you feel more comfortable using soap, use soap. Just be sure that you rinse it really well so that your food doesn't end up tasting like soap, because those pores in the cast iron can hold on to some of that soap, and you can end up with soapy flavors in your food. And also make sure that you dry it thoroughly on the stove to get all that excess moisture out of the metal before putting in storage. All right, I hope I've given you some confidence with your cast iron. I love cooking with cast iron. All of my pans are cast iron, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So just remember, season after every use is the big thing, and once or twice a year do a deep seasoning with the flax oil to create the polymer coating on the metal that will help build even more seasoning. Do you struggle with your cast iron, or do you love your cast iron? Let me know in the comments, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching.